Zombies, dark spirits, light spirits, translated beings, multiple lives. You'd think we were talking about some ancient alien shit, but no, it's really just Chad and Lori Daybell's super weird, twisted tale of love. Ugh, that even felt gross saying it, honestly. What's up, guys? It's your girl Ginger, the true crime queen. I'm reminding you now that listener discretion is advised. The dark nature of this show is not suitable for young ears or those that are sensitive to graphic material. But without further ado, let's get it. Hey all you lovely humans, you. Today's episode is a big update, obviously, on the search for Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow. As you've heard, probably, they've been found, and we can all, at the very least, rest knowing they're together in heaven with their fathers. So today, I'm going to cover what's happened with Lori and Chad since she was arrested in February, pretty much where we left off in the last episode, how investigators were able to discover where the children were found. We will also go over the arrest affidavit for Chad Daybell and what's possibly in store for these crazy-ass people. Also, though, at the end, I'm going to talk about my season break, so be sure to at least catch the next episode drop date. Obviously, we're going to talk about the death of 2 children, so I will give you a little heads up when I'm about to discuss something that might be a little bit more upsetting. I mean, other than pretty much the grim nature of the case itself, I suppose. Honestly, I cannot believe it. I cannot believe this woman. Lori Daybell is a real fucking lint licker. This smug bitch has been all smiles virtually the entire time the whole world has been asking and praying, where are the kids, Lori? If you're not familiar with the case at all, honestly, it's super confusing, so if you need more clarity to it, I would recommend the last episode I did on the case for the deep dive, but today I will also be vaguely covering the timeline because we're able now to fill in a lot of the gaps, even with the little information that has already come out. And now I'm guessing there's going to be a couple trials in the near future, so I'll definitely get into that towards the end. But mostly going in chronological order from the beginning of Lori's crazy-ass train ride to hell. Choo-choo! Melanie Gibb has explained in interviews that Lori and Chad originally first met each other in 2018 at a Preparing a People's private event. Then starting in February of 2019, just last year, Lori's third husband, Charles Vallow, is blindsided with Lori's newly found extreme beliefs, as well as somewhat of an idea that Lori was possibly having an affair, which he wasn't wrong. And he does what he can to get away from her by filing for divorce, asking for her to be mentally evaluated, as well as seeking full custody of the children because she's gone batshit crazy from his point of view. Next, in May of last year, Lori somehow convinces Charles to drop the divorce proceedings, though we all know that was now a ploy to just hopefully secure his financial assets before having him killed by her angel of death, Alex, her brother. Charles even forewarned that if something were to happen to him, it would be the doing of Lori or her brother Alex. Then guess what? Alex fucking shoots Charles in a rental home that he is paying for Lori to stay in with JJ and Tylee on July 11th, while Lori can be seen all laughs and smiles on police body cam footage because she got exactly what she wanted, and Alex shouldn't get in any trouble either. And neither will Tylee, as she had covered so well by implementing herself with the story of the bat that she brought out for self-protection. Lori then gets the fuck out of Dodge, which is Arizona, and dumps her kids' beds and furniture on the street corner with a sign that says free. She rehomes JJ's specially trained Labradoodle and moves right up to the promised land of Idaho, as Chad had seemingly convinced her of. The last known sighting of Tylee was found to be on September 8th of 2019, last year, when her mom documented a few ominous photos at one of the entrances to Yellowstone. The photo was heavily circulated. You've probably seen the shot of her hugging onto little JJ next to one of the Yellowstone Park's wooden fences. It's theorized that Tylee must have left Yellowstone with Alex while JJ traveled back home with Lori, being that Tylee was never seen alive again. We now know that Alex's cell phone was actually found to be pinging in a location that puts him directly on the property of Chad Daybell in the exact area in which human remains have been said to be located. Which means Alex, at the very least, cleaned up this mess literally just hours after that photo was taken. Chad then actually sent his very much alive and well wife, Tammy, this now seemingly suspicious text message concerning him doing a little yard work with what he describes as burning off like a little dry brush or something from around their property, as well as this weird alleged incident that he claims to have had with a raccoon, which he said he ended up shooting and promptly burying on the family's little pet cemetery, as he referred to it as. Now, this is obviously Chad rusing to disguise the recently concealed bodies from Alex and from police, as well as Tammy, as she was not dead yet. So, you guys, that means that they hid those bodies on her property before she was even dead. Next thing we know, Melanie Gibb, Lori's podcast friend, and her boyfriend, I'm guessing, actually travel up to Idaho to visit Lori for a few days over a weekend. Lori told Melanie that Tylee was away at college while JJ was seen by Melanie Gibb and her boyfriend last on the evening of September 22nd, just prior to them recording an episode for the podcast. Alex was said to have taken JJ over to his apartment as he was being too rambunctious or too loud for them to record, apparently. And they later saw Alex carrying what appeared to be a sleeping JJ back into Lori's apartment after they were finished recording. On September 23rd, the next morning, when Melanie and her boyfriend were said to have been getting ready to leave, they asked Lori where JJ was, and she told them this weird-ass story about how JJ had gone all omen on him and had some freak out where he was literally climbing up and down the kitchen cabinets and throwing a picture of Jesus off the wall. So she had Alex take him away, or at least out of the apartment. But it was later found that Alex Cox's cell phone location also pinged on the property of Chad and Tammy Daybell for a second time, likely concealing the body of JJ. Lori is then known to have rented a storage unit in Rexburg, Idaho in the beginning of October and moved many of the kids' keepsakes in and out of it. The next day, the recent ex-husband of Lori's close niece, Brandon Bordeaux, had notified police in Arizona that there was an attempted shooting on his life outside his home from what appeared to be a white Jeep Wrangler, which coincidentally turned out to be the same car that Tylee was known to have been driving, as it was originally her father Charles's car, who, as we all know, was shot just months earlier by none other than Alex, Lori's brother. It was also theorized that Alex was possibly the driver of that Jeep Wrangler from the shooting incident with Brandon. You can see in security tape footage at the storage unit a man and Lori loading in the back seat and the fifth tire to a Jeep, which is pretty damning evidence if you ask me. And I normally don't like Facebook overall, but in this case, thank the Lords, because it was a week or so before Chad's wife Tammy would mysteriously die in her sleep that she would make a now super creepy Facebook post about some weirdo who had tried to shoot her with a paintball gun after she returned home from making some freezer meals with her friends. She didn't seem to take this as seriously as she should have, because there now seems to be a big indication that the man was likely Alex, probably attempting to shoot her with a silence gun, but he apparently can't aim for shit. So I suppose it could have also been her own husband Chad as well. However, we won't know unless he confesses it, which is unlikely, considering he is literally the only one alive out of the three of them now. Less than 2 weeks later, Tammy Daybell reportedly died in her sleep on the night of October 22nd. She was buried in her home state of Utah and was said to not have had an autopsy done at the request of the family, which was most likely Chad, and apparently nobody found that to be a huge red flag of any sort at the time. I've heard that through the Dateline episodes, though, that one of Chad's daughters it did express how she personally feared that her father would get remarried very quickly. And, maybe she's a prophet of some sort all on her own, because guess what happened then? Lint Liquor Lori and Goober McGee Chad then dip out to Hawaii to get married on the beach on November 5th. They were said to have met with a few prospective landlords while looking for a place to live on the island of Kauai, claiming that they were both childless newlyweds. Dude, Chad threw away 29 years of marriage for a piece of trash like Lori. Just around Thanksgiving, Larry and Kay Woodcock, which would actually turn out to be JJ's biological grandparents, have now gone several months and even a couple holidays without seeing or speaking to their grandson JJ. And they have been totally unable to communicate at all with Lori, as she was obviously avoiding them. And because we all know how much better women are at getting the information we want than the police are, Kay was actually able to guess a few of her brother Charles's own passwords and actually got into an Amazon account that Lori was still using. Kay was actually able to look up the new shipping address that Lori was having items sent to. So Kay wrote down the address and called the police in Arizona, who then notified the police in Idaho on the request of a welfare check of their grandson JJ Vallow at the home of his adopted mother Lori, who had just recently moved into their county. You guys want to know what type of packages that Lori was having sent to her new place in Rexburg? Turns out to be a cheap wedding ring for her and Chad to use on the beach of Kauai. So police then go to visit Lori's apartment on November 26th, where they find her brother Alex, who gives them the bullshit excuse that JJ was with his grandparents, which they know is completely false because that's who's inquiring about the check. They then ask Chad, who's also apparently there, if he's seen JJ, which he says not in months and that he doesn't even really know Lori, even though they are fucking married, actually.
Oh my God, stop fucking lying.
Finally, they talk to Lori because it turns out that she was upstairs calling her podcast friend Melanie Gibb to cover for her about having JJ, which Melanie told her abso-fucking-lutely not. And within a couple weeks, she actually goes to the police herself about Lori and Chad's incriminating relationship. However, it sounds like Lori didn't give a shit what Melanie thought because she went right downstairs and told the cops straight up that Alex got it wrong and JJ is at her friend Melanie Gibbs' house in Arizona. So they leave to check that out, and when it turns out to also be bullshit, they return to Lori's apartment the very next day on November 27th with a search warrant to find everyone has left town conveniently. Now, I'm not sure why, because I doubt he was actually in love or anything, but Lori's brother Alex Cox then reportedly gets married in a rush ceremony that takes place while in Las Vegas to a woman named Zulema Pastinas. He was also said to have taken her last name, which the officiant noted was rather unusual, as well as a total lack of emotion during the ceremony. I'm fairly sure this was all some type of financial agenda with Alex getting his finances in order prior to what would be his almost predictable death. Now looking back at things, I think he needed to die for Lori, and that he probably would do it. Since Chad's ran off and gotten himself involved with a woman whose children have seemingly vanished off the face of the earth and only married her just 2 weeks after his first wife of 29 years is dead, investigators actually go out to Utah and have her remains exhumed for an official autopsy on December 11th, which the results I have not actually seen been released. And I'm not sure exactly how you would do this, but Alex Cox was then said to have died the day after Tammy's body was exhumed, and apparently he is said to have died of natural causes from a blood clot in his lungs, but honestly, how fucking convenient is that? And his test results aren't technically released until May of 2020, so act like you don't know that for the sake of the timeline. On December 20th, just a week after Alex dies, the police department goes public on December 20th about the kids being missing and the fact that they haven't been seen since September. Next, Rexburg police execute a search of Chad's home on the 3rd of January, and they reportedly seized over 40 items from the home, including computers and important documents, old cell phones, and I guess even some old medication. After Chad and Lori were found to have been staying on the island of Kauai, it was January 25th when the police on Kauai actually ordered Lori to produce her children to the courts within 5 days of the issuance, which we all impatiently waited for any sign of the kids, which we know was literally impossible for Lori to do, as many of us feared the most. When her time was up, she hadn't proven the kids were okay, and we were all just waiting and wondered why exactly she wasn't arrested immediately. When it finally happens, Lori's arrested on February 20th and charged with child abandonment, obstructing the investigation, like when she lied where the children were and when she said that they were at her podcast friend Melanie Gibbs' house. She was also charged with the contempt of court when she didn't bring them to court to prove that they were alive or well. She was given a $5 million bail. Lori was then taken into custody at Madison County Jail on March 5th, back in Idaho State, where she is currently still being held awaiting her trial. Now, the judges dropped Lori's bail the next day from the $5 million that was ordered upon her arrest in Hawaii to just $1 million while in Madison County on March 6th. And Idaho has a law granting defendants the right to petition for a new judge during their time with the courts, and Lori did just that, so a new judge has been ushered into the case. Next is technically when the cause of Alex Cox will come out. They cited he had died from natural causes with a blood clot in his lung. Also, normally, I wouldn't question this as it does seem natural, but doesn't it also seem interesting that Lori's husband, before Charles, Tylee's dad actually, was said to have died of natural causes as well. I believe it was a heart attack, but is there any possibility that those two seemingly natural causes of death are in fact unnatural? I mean, I will willfully admit that I'm getting a little conspiracy theorist here, but honestly, Alex's death is just so convenient for Lori. Too convenient, I would say. But just to clarify, Alex's death was said to be of natural causes. Then is when we searched Chad's property for the second time, June 9th, 2020. Trigger warning for this section. Bright and early on the morning of June 9th, Chad wakes up to a shit ton of investigators presenting him with this neat little search warrant for his entire property. And within hours, they are able to find what appears to be that of human remains, and he is immediately arrested and taken into the county jail. Police were there to search a few areas, specifically in relation to the cell phone ping locations of Alex Cox's phone on the dates of September 9th, 2019, as well as September 23rd, 2018. One area included the fire pit, another a plot of land near a barn, and the third being an area near their property's pet cemetery. Ugh, and seriously, that just gives me the heebie-jeebies just saying it. Among the remains found, there was also said to be many fragments and pieces of animal bone, charred human bones and tissue, as well as even uncharred human tissue. Investigators discovered, quote, several flat rocks were under a patch of disturbed ground in an area the size of about 4 foot by 2.5 feet. And yes, one of the bodies was discovered buried beneath more bricks, then within one black garbage bag constricted with duct tape, and then a second white garbage bag that contained what appeared to be human hair. I believe this was likely the body of 7-year-old JJ, who had gone missing after Tylee did. That inevitably means that the charred and uncharred human remains that were found near the fire pit were likely those of 17-year-old Tylee's. But that is honestly just a guess. They have not explicitly said that from what I have read. Chad reportedly watched the entire search of the property go down while sitting in his car that happened to be parked across the street from his house at one of his daughter's homes. And allegedly, when investigators got to the bags of human remains, Chad drove off down the street like a total little bitch, as if he might actually get away. It seems a little telling, Chad. I mean, not that you have much of a defense as it is, but definitely not a good look to drive away upon the discovery of the same children everyone's been looking for literally almost a year now. And you guys, that trigger warning is still effective because I have to clarify some things here. It is obvious that Tylee will most likely not be able to be given a definitive cause of death, and I'm assuming that her remains are the ones that have been burned, and I really, really doubt a confession will be coming from either one of Chad or Lori, because I think it's all going to be pinned on Alex, who is not alive anyways. JJ might actually still be in a condition where they can determine an actual cause of death, at least from my understanding of the details on the arrest paperwork. So obviously, Chad was stopped by officers just down the street from his home and then officially charged with 2 felony counts of altering, destroying, or concealing of evidence between the dates of both September 9th and September 23rd of 2019 through June 9th of 2020, the date of his arrest. And his bond is currently set the same as Lori's at $1 million. So that means he concealed their bodies knowing it would be considered evidence for an upcoming criminal proceeding. And with these charges, at the most, Chad is looking at 5 years per each of the 2 counts. So 10 years total and or a $20,000 fine, which is absolute fucking bullshit. I think something's up here. I just don't know exactly what. It does not seem to be like they're throwing the book at him by any means, being that the charges say nothing to the likes of anything that has to do with like human remains. The language says concealment or destruction of evidence. Why is that? Remember when he ran as they found a body? Why isn't there a charge for evading or something? Is he going to turn on her? Is that why they aren't charging him as harshly as they could? They need his testimony or something? Which, if you look at the big picture here, it's a major conspiracy between all 3, Chad, Lori, and fucking Alex, who sounds to me like the one who actually physically killed those children. And I'm not quite sure if they're going to be able to charge Lori or Chad with the actual murders of either Tylee or JJ from the sounds of the affidavit. The assumption that the remains are those of the children was confirmed on June 10th by family members, and then again on June 13th when their autopsies were reportedly conducted. And Chad's lawyers went ahead and pled not guilty for him on Monday, June 15th. I cannot fucking wait to hear his excuse as to why this isn't almost entirely his fault, since he's supposed to be the damn near leader of this crazy-ass fucking cult. You guys, it's not preparing a people that's a cult. It's Chad fucking Daybell. So as I'm recording this on June 30th, Lori appeared in court today, as well as Chad, and they upped Chad's charges after Lori appeared in court, and they actually gave him one of the charges that she has had. They added 2 counts of conspiracy to commit destruction, alteration, or concealment of evidence, which adds an additional 10 years to his possible charges and another 20 grand. So they're each looking at about 20 to 30 years if the charges don't increase. I believe Chad's first preliminary hearing is scheduled for either July 1st or July 2nd, and I heard his lawyers were said to have requested both a pre-trial hearing as well as a jury trial. So, I mean, I cannot wait. I can't wait, you guys, to hear what happened. Both Lori and Chad's trial has yet to be announced as they're trying to figure out what really happened to these kids, though they're also both under investigation specifically for the death of Chad's first wife, Tammy, being that her untimely death might also be a direct result of Lori and Chad's, entire plan, which I think is either quite obvious or possibly one of the most coincidental things that ever happened in the entire history of the world. And I'm a little upset to admit this, but Chad was a gravedigger, you guys. How come we didn't see this coming? I honestly feel like that was so obvious. And at the same time, I would be willing to bet money that the whole time everybody was sitting around wondering where the kids were, and we were coming up with theories like, did they get pushed somewhere into Yellowstone? I bet Lori was sitting in jail like, oh my fucking God, you guys, that was such a better idea than burying them in Chad's own yard, where you know they were gonna look. I cannot believe they were as stupid as they were as to bury them in the yard. Oh my God. And you guys, it's obviously sad as hell that these children didn't make it away from Lori and Chad. We were all somewhat hoping. But on the other hand, I think we all saw it coming. It would be awesome to see both Chad and Lori's charges increased, as well as additional charges in regards to Tammy Daybell's death, and maybe even something to do with Alex and Charles's deaths too, if we really get lucky. I'll have to pick it up next whenever either one of their trials begins. Hopefully it won't be too long, but with the state of the pandemic and how slow the justice system moves as it is, I bet it won't be any sooner than this time next year, probably. That's just my vote. I have a quick shout out to CJ for your review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for taking the time. As a fellow podcaster, you know how helpful it is to the charts. So please be sure, you guys, to check out CJ's podcast. It's called Beyond the Rainbow, which covers the very much underreported true crime cases against the LGBT community. And I got another huge shout out to Jonathan for becoming a patron of the podcast, which is honestly great timing too, as I have 3 bonus episodes scheduled to drop pretty soon as well. So muchas gracias, Jonathan. Guys, if you haven't checked out the Patreon, I offer early releases on podcast episodes, direct links to past live streams, as well as I'm now implementing some of the new bonus episodes with a few polls to vote on future episode topics. So if you're interested at all in some extra content over my season break, definitely hop onto Patreon/Ginger the True Crime Queen and check it out. And I also have a quick shout out to you. Yes, you. Thank you for listening to 20 straight episodes of my little old ass ranting about serial killers and missing kids. I appreciate each and every one of you for listening, and I very much enjoy doing this with you guys. So official heads up that this is my last episode for season 2. I like to do 10 or 11 per season, and then take a month or so off to spend some time with the family exclusively. I plan on dropping the first episode of season 3 in August. So you guys, make sure you get out and enjoy some sunshine, be safe, lock your doors, and just wear the mask. Let's beat Corona together. All right, you guys, see you back in August. And that was the tea. I hope you guys enjoyed my rendition of the story, and if so, please tell all your creepy friends about it. You can find the sources I used for the episode in its description. You can find me slanging those memes on Instagram at True Crime Queen. Check them out if you need some laughs after all this dark shit. If you'd like to support the podcast, consider buying me a coffee so I can keep making that killer ass content. You see what I did there? Alright, you guys. Bye.